What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at what will be the final early access patch or update for Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon, which I am able to do because Awaken Realms, the game's publisher, gave me slightly early access to said update, which itself is actually launching for everybody on March 25th. So if you want to check any of this out for yourself, it will be available then, and what's more, there is actually a demo releasing on the 25th as well for Xbox and PS5. Following this big update, while there may or may not be a patch or two here and there to sort of clean up any glaring issues, beyond something like that, this is pretty much it until the game fully launches a little later this year. Last I heard, I think they were targeting summer, but, could go either way. That said, let's actually talk about the update itself, because it's pretty massive. It overhauls a few things. It also just straight up adds a whole ton of content, and in particular, though, I would say that a slight spoiler warning is actually in order, because this update finally kind of gives us the clear picture for the prologue in Act 1, meaning that we kind of see beat for beat what is happening here, and while some of it's pretty obvious because the whole game is set around Arthurian legend, the story is pretty well, implemented at this point. And in particular, now with this update, we've got access to about a third of what will ultimately be the final game, and it really does seem to be quite the update. So straight away we've got that completely new prologue, which comes with a sort of, at the very least, approaching final character creation, at least on the cosmetic side, where we'll now have a bunch of different choices to actually make the character you want to make, so you're a little more able to actually customize and tweak what's going on here, and while it's a decent character creator, it's not exactly mind-blowing or anything, still nonetheless a lot better than what was here previously. But after character creation, we, as always, have to escape the prison that we have been put in because we have the Red Death. But even here, there's a whole host of new things to see. New areas, additions. In fact, the two people that we would normally meet on the beach have been moved inside the prison itself, and you can kind of see them in the process of their own escapes. They've even added some mini-bosses. It looks like mini-bosses as well will have a little cutscene associated with them. And those mini-bosses are probably as good a place as any to get a feel for some updated combat and everything, mostly down to animation and making the entire thing feel a little more fluid. And while I doubt the game will ever say reach like Souls-like level of improved melee, it is definitely feeling a lot better than it did previously, at least to me. But realistically, melee combat is only one facet of the puzzle here in Tainted Grail, because we have a whole host of magic at our disposal as well, and I would say they've really tightened up the animations and the casting here. And one thing I really enjoy about this system as a whole is that each spell you get has a sort of light and heavy version, which can actually differ quite a bit. For instance, one of the starting spells you can get is called Blood Transfusion, which will apply a bleed to enemies when it's cast in its light version, but the heavy or the channeled version actually absorbs health from the enemy to heal you, and that's kind of what you're looking at. Now, this sort of revamp also applies to things like summoning spells. Summoning spells will now sort of block off a portion of your total mana bar if that's the route you want to go, but even then, all of that doesn't even cover things like the new items. For instance, they've added spears in. We're also looking at what is likely to be the sort of finalized version for things like attributes and the skill trees and whatnot, so every time we level we typically get like 1 point for each. And they've spread out the attributes a little, in part to accommodate things like the updated crafting systems as well, but for instance, dexterity will help you out with things like sneaking and everything as you might expect, but you actually need things like perception for extra sneak damage, and while you'll get it from both, perception kind of weighs more heavily. So you have some options, or at least some better spread in terms of attributes, it looks like, is what they adjusted there. And then there's the skill trees themselves. We've seen a little bit of this stuff previously, but it looks a little more diverse now, especially with things like crafting and other sort of tertiary systems involved. And between the skills, the attributes, as well as the various forms of combat, it looks like there's going to be some pretty solid builds here. Now, I did mention crafting there. Crafting has been around, but things like blacksmithing, alchemy, and cooking have been updated and just kind of expanded to be more generally useful in ways you would probably expect playing something like this. Blacksmithing is still by far the most in-depth in my opinion, because you can do things like add artifacts or little upgrades to your current equipment. You can upgrade that gear, etc., to sort of keep it relevant, which has been the case up to this point, just kind of has a better UI and is a little more easily readable now. And while you do all of that with all your different builds and all the new items and stuff, you'll also be able to take a good photo of it, as they added photo mode in this update. But believe it or not, all of that, basically everything that we just went over, isn't even really, I would say, some of the most exciting stuff. While I haven't gotten to fully experience the rest of this for myself, they've apparently added in romance, a whole host of new NPCs to add things like quests, dungeons for those things to take place in, that sort of stuff. And then they've also introduced the guild quest lines as well. I haven't fully made my way through that content by any means, so I don't have all the details of it myself, but excited to see it added in for sure. Now, even then, though, we still have a whole host of smaller little details to get into. For instance, they've overhauled the lighting, especially out in the open world, not so much the dungeon areas. This also comes alongside improved weather effects. For instance, the weird nights are especially dark and gloomy now, which is accompanied by an updated soundtrack, alongside smaller updates like, for instance, there's a farming system now to allow you to grow ingredients for alchemy or cooking. The house system should be in there now, which is great. And all of that, I think, really underscores just how massive this update really is, and that is great, obviously, but it also, of course, isn't the actual 1.0 release either, which is what I'm especially excited for after having played this new content update, because just straight away from the new areas, the better flow of combat, all of these revamp systems making the game feel much more polished and, I would say, approaching something clearly a little more finalized. This is a gigantic step in the right direction. And the last time I took a look at Tainted Grail was for its big update with the new zone and everything. I would really say this update right here is the one that has truly made me excited for the actual release of this game, because I really did have a blast with it. And thus, while I was always going to cover this update has really rocketed this game up to, I would say, one of the games I'm looking forward to covering most this year when it launches in full. But for now, I think you kind of get the picture. But by all means, let me know what you think about all this down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. If you wind up trying this out for yourself, I'd love to know what you think of it down below as well. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.